They said she was nothing, a forgotten Omega, too weak to matter, too broken to rise. But when the Alpha King's pack crumbled beneath the weight of betrayal and his throne grew cold with doubt, it was her mark that burned across his skin like wildfire. In a world where power is measured in blood and loyalty is bought with fear, one Omega will shatter every rule. She will claim the king the pack abandoned. She will rewrite destiny itself. And when the moon rises full, they will all remember her name. The crescent moonpack territory stretched across the northern mountains like a kingdom carved from shadow and stone. Ancient pines towered over the land, their roots drinking from rivers that ran silver under moonlight. The packhouse itself was a fortress, 3 stories of dark timber and iron, with windows that glowed amber against the perpetual twilight of the wolf realm. Here, hierarchy was law. Here, blood determined destiny. And here Elara Thorne had learned to make herself invisible. She moved through the packhouse kitchens with practiced silence, her bare feet soundless against the cold stone floor. Dawn hadn't yet broken, but the Omega quarters never slept. There was always work, always service, always the weight of being less. The scent of pine smoke and roasting meat filled the air as she prepared the Alpha family's breakfast, her hands steady, despite the exhaustion that lived in her bones. Faster, Elara. The head Omega, Margot, didn't look up from her cutting board. The Alpha King rises early. You know how he despises waiting. Elara nodded, swallowing the words that wanted to rise. She knew. She knew everything about Alpha King Kael Blackthorn. The way he took his coffee, black as midnight. The way his presence filled a room like a storm about to break. The way his silver eyes could strip a wolf bare with a single glance. She knew because she'd spent 3 years in his household, 3 years as invisible as smoke, 3 years watching him from the shadows, 3 years loving him in silence. The thought made her hands tremble. She steadied them, focusing on the task. Omegas didn't love Alphas. Omegas served. That was the law written in blood and bone, the hierarchy that kept the pack strong. She was the lowest, orphaned, weak, her wolf so small it barely stirred beneath her skin. And Kael was the highest, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, ruler of 12 packs, a warrior whose name made enemies flee. The distance between them was infinite. He's in a foul mood this morning, Margot continued, her knife moving with brutal efficiency. The council meeting last night didn't go well. Beta Marcus says there's talk of challenge. Elara's heart stuttered. Challenge. The word tasted like iron and fear. In the wolf realm, an alpha kept his throne through strength and loyalty. Lose either, and the pack would turn. Kael had ruled for 7 years with an iron fist and unshakable power. But lately, something had shifted. She'd felt it in the packhouse. Whispers in dark corners, eyes that didn't meet his, a tension that coiled tighter each day. Who would dare? Elara whispered. Margot's laugh was bitter. Who wouldn't? The king has no mate, no heir, no vulnerability. Some say he's too cold, too brutal. Others say he's cursed, that the moon goddess herself has turned from him. She finally looked up, her eyes hard. Either way, a king without a queen is a king without roots, and a tree without roots falls. The words settled over Elara like frost. She'd heard the rumors. Everyone had. Kael had rejected 3 potential mates in as many years, each one a high-born alpha female, each one perfect by pack standards. He'd called them shallow, ambitious, unworthy. The pack had called him impossible, but Elara understood. She'd seen the loneliness in his eyes when he thought no one watched, the way he stood at his office window staring into the forest as if searching for something he'd lost. She'd seen the man beneath the crown, and that man was drowning. Take the tray up, Margot ordered, and don't linger. The king doesn't need Omega eyes on him this morning. Elara lifted the heavy silver tray, balancing it with care as she climbed the servants' stairs. The packhouse woke around her, wolves stirring, voices rising, the constant hum of pack life. But the 3rd floor, where the Alpha King's private chambers resided, was silent as a tomb. She knocked twice, soft and respectful. Enter. His voice was gravel and smoke, a sound that made her wolf whimper with instinctive submission. She pushed the door open with her hip, keeping her eyes down as she'd been taught. The room smelled of him, pine and leather and something wild that made her skin prickle with awareness. He stood at the window, his back to her, shoulders rigid beneath a black shirt that did nothing to hide the warrior's body beneath. On the desk, he said without turning. She obeyed, setting the tray down with trembling hands. She should leave. She should bow and retreat and return to her invisible existence. But something made her pause, made her risk a glance at his reflection in the window glass. He looked exhausted. Shadows bruised the skin beneath his silver eyes, and his jaw was tight with tension. His dark hair was disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it all night. For a moment he looked less like a king and more like a man carrying a weight too heavy to bear. Is there something else? His eyes met hers in the reflection, and the impact stole her breath. No, Alpha King. Her voice was barely a whisper. I hope you slept well. A muscle ticked in his jaw. I didn't. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. She should go. She should... What's your name? The question shocked her into stillness. 3 years. 3 years of serving him, and he'd never asked. Elara, Alpha King. Elara Thorn. Thorn. He turned then, and the full force of his attention was like standing in a lightning strike. I knew a Thorn once. Marcus Thorn. He was my father's beta before the war. Her heart clenched. He was my father. Something flickered in Kael's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or regret. He died with honor. Saved my father's life in the Battle of Crimson Ridge. He studied her with an intensity that made her want to flee and stay in equal measure. Why are you in the Omega quarters? Your father's bloodline should have guaranteed you better. Because I have no wolf worth speaking of. Because I'm weak. Because the pack decided my fate the moment they saw what I was. I serve where I'm needed, Alpha King. His eyes narrowed, as if he could see through the careful words to the truth beneath. For a heartbeat, she thought he might press further. But then his expression shuttered, the king's mask sliding back into place. You may go. She bowed and fled, her heart hammering against her ribs. Only when she reached the safety of the kitchens did she let herself breathe, let herself acknowledge the dangerous truth that lived in her chest. She was in love with a king who didn't know she existed, and tomorrow everything would change. Because tomorrow was the Lunar Gathering, the night when the 12 packs came together under the full moon, when alliances were forged and challenges issued, when the Alpha King would be expected to choose a mate or face the consequences of standing alone. Tomorrow Elara's invisible life would shatter, and in the ruins something ancient and powerful would finally wake. The Lunar Gathering grounds sprawled across the sacred clearing at the heart of the Northern Territories, a vast circle of ancient stone pillars that hummed with old magic. Torches blazed against the night sky, casting dancing shadows across hundreds of wolves gathered in their finest. The air thrummed with power, thick with the scent of pine, smoke, and the wild musk of dominant wolves marking territory. Elara stood at the very edge of the gathering, hidden among the other Omegas who served but did not participate. Her simple grey dress marked her status as clearly as a brand. No colors, no adornment, nothing to draw the eye. She carried a tray of crystal glasses filled with blood wine, moving like a ghost through the crowd, but her eyes kept finding him. Kael stood at the center of the gathering, magnificent in black leather and silver chains that marked his rank. The moonlight loved him, turning his dark hair to midnight silk and making his silver eyes glow like molten metal. He was surrounded by the other alphas, powerful wolves from the 12 packs, each one watching him with varying degrees of respect and calculation, and beside him, draped on his arm like a possession, was Lyanna Silvercrest. Elara's heart twisted. Lyanna was everything an Alpha Queen should be, tall and elegant, with platinum hair that cascaded down her back like a waterfall of moonlight. She was the daughter of Alpha Silvercrest, ruler of the Eastern Territories, and she'd been pursuing Kael for 2 years with single-minded determination. Tonight, she wore a gown of deep crimson that clung to every curve, a color that announced her intentions as clearly as a declaration of war. The binding ceremony will begin soon, a voice murmured beside her. Elara turned to find Thomas, a young beta who'd always been kind to her, his eyes sympathetic. Word is, the council gave the Alpha King an ultimatum. Choose a mate tonight, or face a vote of no confidence. Elara's blood ran cold. They can't force him. They can't force the choice, Thomas agreed quietly. But they can force the consequences. A king without a mate is a king without stability. And with the tensions rising, with whispers of the Shadow Pack moving on our borders, he shook his head. The council wants certainty. They want an heir. They want proof that the moon goddess hasn't abandoned our king. The words struck like physical blows. Elara watched as Lyanna leaned close to Kael, whispering something that made his jaw tighten. He didn't pull away. He didn't smile. But he didn't reject her either, and that hurt more than Elara wanted to admit. A horn sounded, deep and resonant, silencing the crowd. Elder Moira stepped forward, ancient and powerful, her white hair gleaming in the torchlight. She was the pack's spiritual leader, the one who communed with the moon goddess, and when she spoke, even alphas listened. "We gather under the full moon to witness the sacred bonds that strengthen our packs," she intoned, her voice carrying across the clearing. "Tonight, Alpha King Kael Blackthorn will choose his mate, his queen, his equal before the goddess." The crowd erupted in howls of approval. Elara's hands trembled, the glasses on her tray clinking together. This was it. This was the moment she'd been dreading. Kael stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "I have considered the council's wisdom," he said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade, "and I have made my choice." Lyanna's smile was triumphant. She moved to stand beside him, her hand reaching for his, but Kael's eyes swept across the gathering, searching. For a heartbeat they landed on Elara, and something flickered in their silver depths, recognition, confusion, something that made her breath catch. Then his gaze moved on. "I choose—" "Wait!" a voice rang out, sharp and commanding. Beta Marcus pushed through the crowd, his face grim. Behind him came two wolves Elara didn't recognize, their sense foreign and aggressive. "Alpha King, there is a matter that must be addressed before any binding can occur." Kael's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Speak quickly, Marcus. You interrupt a sacred ceremony." Marcus's expression was pained, but he pressed on. "These wolves come from the Shadow Pack. They bring accusations." The temperature in the clearing seemed to drop 10 degrees. The Shadow Pack, the rogues and outcasts who lived beyond Pack law, who raided borders and stole territory. They were enemies, and their presence here was an insult. "What accusations?" Kael's voice was deadly quiet. One of the shadow wolves stepped forward, a scarred male with eyes like chips of ice. "We accuse you, Alpha King, of weakness, of failure, of being unworthy of your crown." He smiled, showing too many teeth. "We accuse you of being mateless not by choice, but because the moon goddess herself has rejected you." The gathering exploded into chaos, snarls, shouts, the sound of wolves on the edge of shifting. But Kael stood perfectly still, his power radiating outward in waves that made even the strongest wolves step back. "You dare," he whispered, and the words carried more threat than any shout. "I dare because it's true," the shadow wolf continued. "For 7 years you've ruled alone. For 7 years you've rejected every worthy female. Why?" He circled Kael like a predator. "Because you're cursed. Because you're broken. Because you're—" "Enough!" Elder Moira's voice cracked like thunder. "These are lies meant to sow discord. The Alpha King's mate bond is his own business." "Is it?" Lyanna's voice cut through the tension, cold and sharp. Elara's stomach dropped as the alpha female stepped away from Kael, her expression no longer adoring but calculating. "Perhaps they speak truth, Elder. Perhaps we've all been blind." Kael turned to her slowly, betrayal flickering across his features. "Lyanna, I have waited 2 years for you to choose me," she said, her voice rising. 2 years of patience, of devotion, of proving myself worthy. And for what? To stand beside a king who feels nothing, who can't even pretend to want me." She laughed, bitter and cruel. "The shadow wolves are right. You're broken, Kael, and I won't tie myself to a sinking ship." She turned to the crowd, her voice projecting across the clearing. "I, Lyanna Silvercrest, formally reject any bond with Alpha King Kael Blackthorn. Let it be witnessed, I will not mate with a wolf the goddess has cursed." The words hung in the air like poison. Elara watched in horror as other wolves began to murmur, to nod, to step back from their king. The humiliation was public, absolute, devastating. And then Elara felt it, a stirring deep in her chest, a heat that spread through her veins like liquid fire. Her wolf, silent for so long, suddenly surged to the surface with a power that stole her breath. The tray fell from her hands, crystal shattering against stone. Every wolf in the clearing turned to stare, and Elara's eyes, no longer brown but blazing gold, locked onto Kael's silver gaze. "No," she whispered. But her wolf was already moving, already claiming, already marking. Power erupted from her in a wave of pure golden light, ancient and undeniable. It crashed over Kael like a tsunami, and she saw his eyes widen in shock as the mate bond snapped into place between them. Fierce, unbreakable, absolute. The forgotten Omega had just marked the Alpha King as her own, and the world would never be the same. The pack house exploded into chaos the moment Elara collapsed. She woke 3 days later in a room she didn't recognize, small but clean, with whitewashed walls and a single window that overlooked the forest. Her body ached as if she'd been torn apart and reassembled, and her wolf was awake, truly awake. She could feel it prowling beneath her skin, powerful and ancient. Nothing like the weak creature she'd always believed herself to be. "You're finally conscious." The voice was female, warm but cautious. Elara turned to find a woman sitting beside her bed, mid-40s with kind eyes and silver-streaked auburn hair. "I'm Dr. Vera Ashwood. You've been unconscious since the lunar gathering." Your body was adjusting to everything. Memories crashed over Elara like a tidal wave. The golden light, the mate bond, Kael's shocked face, the horrified silence of hundreds of wolves witnessing an Omega mark their king. "Where am I?" Her voice was hoarse, unfamiliar. "The healing wing. You're safe." Vera leaned forward, her expression serious. "Elara, do you understand what happened to you? I marked the Alpha King." The words tasted like madness. "But that's impossible. Omegas can't mark alphas. We don't have the power." "You're not an Omega." The new voice made Elara's heart stop. She turned to find Elder Moira standing in the doorway, ancient eyes gleaming with something that looked like satisfaction. "You never were, child. You're a Lunar Omega, a wolf, blessed directly by the moon goddess herself. Your kind appears once every century, maybe less. Your power was dormant, waiting for the right moment to wake." Elara stared at her, unable to process the words. That's a myth, a story told to children." "Is it?" Moira moved closer, her presence filling the room with old magic. "Tell me, Elara Thorne, have you always felt different? Have you always sensed things others couldn't? Felt the moon's pull stronger than any wolf around you?" She smiled gently. "Your father knew what you were. He died protecting that secret, hoping you'd have time to grow strong before the truth emerged." Tears burned Elara's eyes. Her father, the hero who'd saved the old Alpha King. He'd known, and he'd never told her. "The mate bond," Elara whispered, "with Kael, is real and unbreakable," Moira confirmed. "The moon goddess chose you for him, Elara. She always had. But the bond could only form when your true nature awakened, and that required—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "A moment of absolute necessity. When the king stood alone, humiliated, his pack's faith crumbling, that's when your wolf finally rose to claim him. He must hate me." The thought was agony. "I humiliated him further. An Omega marking a king in front of everyone." "A Lunar Omega marking her true mate," Vera corrected firmly. "There's a difference, and the pack is beginning to understand that." A knock at the door interrupted them. Elara's heart raced as a familiar figure entered, not Kael, but a man she recognized from the pack house. Tall and lean, with dark skin and intelligent amber eyes, he carried himself with the easy confidence of a wolf who knew his worth. "Ladies," he said with a slight bow, "I'm Dante Ashwood, the pack's historian and Vera's son. Elder Moira asked me to speak with Elara about what comes next." Moira nodded. "I'll leave you to it. Elara, rest and listen. You have much to learn." She paused at the door. "And don't fear the king's reaction. He's been outside this room for 3 days, refusing to leave until you woke. Whatever he feels, it isn't hatred." She left, taking Vera with her. Dante pulled a chair close, his expression kind but serious. "I know you're overwhelmed," he began, "but we don't have much time. The pack is in turmoil. Half believe you're a blessing from the goddess. The other half think you're a curse, an Omega who somehow tricked the mate bond into forming." He held up a hand before she could protest. "I don't believe that, and neither does anyone who matters. But perception is reality in pack politics. What does Kael think?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Dante's smile was knowing. "The Alpha King is conflicted. The mate bond is driving him mad. He can feel your pain, your fear, your confusion. It's taking all his control not to break down that door and claim you properly. But he's also terrified. Of me, of what you represent, of change, of vulnerability." Dante leaned back, his eyes distant. "Kael has ruled through strength and isolation for 7 years. He's never let anyone close, never shown weakness, never trusted anyone completely. And now the goddess has given him a mate who's the opposite of everything he thought he needed. Young, untrained, from the lowest rank. It challenges everything he believes about power and control. The word stung, but Elara understood. She was a complication he'd never wanted. There's more, Dante continued. The Shadow Pack's accusations have gained traction. There are wolves calling for a formal challenge to Kael's rule. They say a king who can be marked by an Omega, even a Lunar Omega, is too weak to lead. Beta Marcus is trying to hold the council together, but it's fracturing. This is my fault. Guilt crashed over her. I've destroyed everything. You've saved everything, a new voice interrupted. Elara looked up to find a young woman in the doorway, petite and fierce, with short black hair and eyes that sparkled with mischief. Sorry, couldn't help overhearing. I'm Sage, by the way. Warrior class, 3rd rank, and officially your new best friend. Dante sighed. Sage, you can't just can and did. Sage bounded into the room with infectious energy. Look, Elara, here's the truth. The pack needed this. Kael needed this. He was turning into a tyrant, cold, distant, impossible to reach. The council was plotting, the warriors were restless, and the Shadow Pack was circling like vultures. You marking him. That was the moon goddess saying, enough. She gave him exactly what he needed, even if he's too stubborn to see it yet. But I don't know how to be a queen, Elara whispered. I don't know how to use these powers, how to lead, how to... That's why we're here, Dante said gently. Elder Moira has asked me to teach you about Lunar Omega history and abilities. Sage will train you in combat and pack politics. Dr. Vera will help you understand the physical changes you're experiencing. And, he hesitated, there's someone else who wants to meet you, someone who knew your father well. Before Elara could ask, the door opened again. This time her breath caught. Beta Marcus stood in the doorway, older now than in her childhood memories, with grey threading through his dark hair, but still powerful and commanding. His eyes, the same amber as her father's, filled with tears when he saw her. Little Elara, he whispered, you look so much like him. You knew, she said, her voice breaking. You knew what I was. Your father told me the night before he died, made me swear to watch over you, to keep you safe until your time came. Marcus moved closer, his expression pained. I failed you. I let them put you in the Omega quarters, let them treat you as less than you were. I thought keeping you hidden would protect you. I was wrong. You kept me alive, Elara said softly. That's enough. Marcus knelt beside her bed, taking her hand. Your father would be so proud, and I swear to you now, I will help you claim your place. You are the Alpha King's true mate, blessed by the goddess herself. Anyone who challenges that will answer to me. The loyalty in his voice made her chest tight. For the first time since waking, Elara felt something other than fear. She felt hope. Teach me, she said, looking at each of them in turn. Teach me everything. I won't let Kael face this alone. I won't let the pack fall because of me. Her wolf surged beneath her skin, golden and fierce. If I'm truly a Lunar Omega, if the goddess chose me for this, then I'll become worthy of it. Sage's grin was feral. Now that's what I'm talking about. Welcome to the fight, Luna. Outside the window, the moon rose full and bright, and somewhere in the pack house, Elara felt it, the mate bond thrumming with awareness, with need, with a connection that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. Kael was close, and soon they would have to face each other, face what they'd become. 3 weeks of training had transformed Elara in ways she'd never imagined possible. Her body, once soft and weak, now moved with a warrior's grace. Sage had been relentless. Dawn runs through the forest, combat drills that left her bruised and gasping, lessons in pack hierarchy that were more brutal than any physical training. Dante had filled her mind with history, teaching her about the ancient Lunar Omegas who'd stood beside kings and shaped destinies. Elder Moira had guided her through meditation, helping her access the vast well of power that now sang in her veins. But through it all she hadn't seen Kael. The mate bond stretched between them like a living thing. She felt his presence constantly, felt his emotions bleeding through when his control slipped. Frustration, desire, fear, anger, longing. It was intoxicating and maddening, this connection to a man who refused to face her. He's afraid, Marcus had explained during one of their private conversations. The bond is stronger than anything he's ever experienced. It threatens his control, his carefully constructed walls. He's fighting it with everything he has. He can't fight it forever, Elara had replied, and the certainty in her voice had surprised them both. Now, standing before the mirror in her new quarters, no longer the Omega dormitory but a suite in the royal wing, Elara barely recognized herself. The woman staring back wore a gown of deep sapphire that hugged her curves and flowed like water. Her dark hair, once always bound and hidden, cascaded in waves down her back. Her eyes glowed with an inner light that marked her as other, as powerful, as chosen. Tonight was the Autumn Equinox Gala, a gathering of the Northern Territory's elite, a political battlefield disguised as celebration. And tonight Kael would formally acknowledge her as his mate before the pack. Or so Marcus claimed. Elara wasn't certain Kael had agreed to anything. "How you look like a queen," Sage said from the doorway, her own dress a striking crimson that matched her fierce personality. "Ready to make some wolves choke on their wine?" Elara's laugh was shaky. "Ready to not embarrass myself, maybe?" "Please, you're going to be magnificent." Sage moved closer, her expression turning serious. "Listen, there's something you should know. Lyanna will be there tonight, and she's not coming alone." Elara's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "She's bringing Alpha Theron Nightshade of the Western Territories. Rumor is they've been close since the lunar gathering, and word is she's going to announce a formal courtship." Sage's eyes flashed with anger. "She's trying to humiliate Kael again, to show the pack that she's moved on while he's still trapped with an Omega mate." "I'm not a trap," Elara said quietly, but the words felt hollow. Wasn't she? Kael hadn't chosen her. The goddess had forced the bond, and now he was stuck with a mate he'd never wanted. "No, you're a gift he's too stubborn to accept," Sage corrected firmly. "But tonight, you're going to remind him, and everyone else, exactly what he has. Come on, it's time." The great hall blazed with light and life. Hundreds of wolves filled the space, alphas and betas in their finest, warriors standing guard, omegas serving with practiced efficiency. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across the crowd, and the air hummed with power and politics. And at the center of it all, standing on the raised dais, was Kael. Elara's breath caught. He wore black as always, but tonight it was formal, a tailored suit that emphasized his warrior's build, silver chains of office across his chest, his dark hair swept back to reveal the sharp angles of his face. He looked every inch the king, powerful and untouchable, until his eyes found hers across the room. The mate bond flared between them like lightning, and Elara saw his control crack. His pupils dilated, his hands clenched at his sides, and for a moment she felt his hunger crash over her in waves. He wanted her, desperately, completely. The bond made lying impossible, but then his expression shuttered, and he looked away. The rejection stung, but Elara lifted her chin and moved through the crowd with Sage at her side. Wolves parted before her, some with respect, others with barely concealed hostility. She felt their stares, heard their whispers. That's her, the Omega who marked the king. Lunar Omega, they're calling her now, as if that makes it acceptable. She's beautiful, I'll give her that, but beauty doesn't make a queen. The king hasn't even acknowledged her. This is a farce. Elara kept walking, kept her head high, kept the mask of confidence in place, even as doubt gnawed at her insides. Marcus appeared at her side, offering his arm with a reassuring smile. "You're doing perfectly," he murmured. "Let them stare. Let them judge. You're about to prove them all wrong." They reached the dais just as Elder Moira called for silence. The crowd settled, hundreds of eyes turning toward the front. Kael stood rigid, his gaze fixed on some point above the crowd, refusing to look at Elara, even as she climbed the steps to stand beside him. "We gather to celebrate the turning of seasons," Moira intoned, her voice carrying across the hall, "and to acknowledge the bonds that strengthen our pack. 3 weeks ago, the moon goddess revealed her will. She gave our Alpha King his true mate, a Lunar Omega blessed with her direct favor." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Elara felt Kael's tension like a physical force beside her. "Tonight," Moira continued, "we formally recognize this bond and welcome our new Luna." "I object." The voice cut through the hall like a blade. Elara's heart sank as Lyanna stepped forward, resplendent in gold, with a tall, handsome Alpha at her side. Alpha Theron Nightshade smiled like a predator as Lyanna continued. "This bond is a mockery, an Omega, even a Lunar Omega, cannot lead this pack. She has no training, no experience, no strength. She's a liability, not a Lunar. Careful, Liana, Marcus growled. You speak of the Alpha King's mate. Do I? Liana's laugh was cruel. Because from where I stand, the Alpha King hasn't even acknowledged her. He hasn't claimed her, hasn't presented her to the pack, hasn't done anything but hide her away like a shameful secret. She turned to Kael, her eyes glittering with malice. Tell me, Alpha King, do you even want this bond, or are you as trapped as we all suspect? The hall fell silent. Every eye turned to Kael, waiting. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it, the moment of truth. Would he reject her publicly? Confirm every doubt and fear? Kael's jaw clenched, his hands fisting at his sides. The silence stretched, agonizing and endless. And then Elara felt her wolf surge forward, felt the power of the goddess flowing through her veins. She'd spent 3 weeks learning, training, preparing. She wouldn't let Liana or anyone reduce her to a victim. You want to know if I'm strong enough to be Lunar? Elara's voice rang out, clear and commanding. Golden light began to emanate from her skin, soft at first, then blazing. Then let me show you. She raised her hand and power exploded outward, pure, ancient, undeniable. It washed over the crowd like a wave, and every wolf in the hall felt it, the blessing of the moon goddess herself, the mark of a true Lunar Omega, a power that made even the strongest alphas drop to one knee in instinctive submission. Every wolf except Kael. He stood frozen, staring at her with something like awe in his silver eyes. The mate bond between them blazed like the sun, and Elara felt his walls finally begin to crumble. I am Elara Thorn, she declared, her voice carrying the weight of destiny. Daughter of Marcus Thorn, hero of the Crimson Ridge, Lunar Omega, blessed by the goddess, and mate to Alpha King Kael Blackthorn. She turned to face him fully, her golden eyes meeting his silver. I didn't ask for this bond. I didn't ask to be thrust into this world, but I am here and I am his, and I will stand beside him whether he wants me to or not, because that's what mates do. That's what the goddess demands. The hall erupted, some in approval, others in shock, but all in recognition of what they'd just witnessed. True power, true destiny, and Kael, his control finally shattered, closed the distance between them in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. Mine, he growled against her ear, and the word was a promise and a surrender. You're mine, Elara, and I'm never letting you go. The kiss that followed was fire and fury, claim and surrender, the mate bond snapping fully into place with a force that shook the foundations of the hall. The forgotten Omega had claimed her king, and the pack would never doubt her again. The days following the autumn equinox gala passed in a blur of transformation. The pack's reaction to Kael's public claim had been seismic. Some wolves celebrated, seeing the mate bond as proof of the moon goddess's favor. Others simmered with resentment, unable to accept an Omega, even a Lunar Omega, as their Lunar. But none could deny the power they'd witnessed, or the way their Alpha King had finally irrevocably chosen his mate. Elara stood in the council chamber now, 6 weeks after that fateful night, facing the 12 alphas who governed the northern territories alongside Kael. The room was circular, built of ancient stone, with windows that overlooked the vast forest. Each alpha sat in a high-backed chair carved with their pack's sigil, their eyes assessing her with varying degrees of acceptance and hostility. Kael sat at the head of the table, his presence commanding even in silence. But this was her test, not his. The council had demanded she prove herself worthy of the Lunar title through more than just the mate bond. They wanted to see her mind, her judgment, her ability to lead. The Shadow Pack has increased raids along our eastern border, Alpha Garrett of the Ironwood Pack said, his voice gruff. They're testing our defenses, looking for weakness. What would you do, Lunar Elara? She felt Kael's tension through the bond. He wanted to intervene to protect her from this interrogation, but she'd asked him to stay silent, to let her stand on her own merit. I would ask why they're raiding, Elara replied calmly. The Shadow Pack are outcasts, yes, but they're not mindless. They raid because they're desperate. No territory, no resources, no place in pack society. If we only respond with force, we perpetuate the cycle. She leaned forward, her golden eyes steady. I would propose a delegation. Offer them a choice. Integrate into our pack structure with conditions or face unified retaliation from all 12 territories. Give them a path to legitimacy, and many will take it. Those who don't, She let steel enter her voice. Those we eliminate without mercy. Silence filled the chamber. Alpha Garrett's eyebrows rose, and she saw grudging respect flicker across his weathered face. Compassion and strategy, Alpha Meredith of the Riverbend Pack murmured, the elegant older woman studying Elara with sharp eyes. Interesting. But what of Liana Silvercrest? She's been spreading poison about you throughout the territories, claiming you've bewitched the Alpha King, that the mate bond is false. How do you handle a political enemy who operates through whispers and manipulation? Elara felt a flash of anger through the bond. Kael's rage at Liana's continued interference. But she kept her expression serene. I would invite her to tea, Elara said simply. The council stared at her. Even Kael looked surprised. Liana thrives on being the victim, the wronged woman, Elara explained. She wants me to retaliate, to prove I'm the vindictive Omega, she claims. So I do the opposite. I extend kindness, offer friendship, show the pack that I'm secure enough in my position to be gracious. She smiled, and there was steel beneath the sweetness. And if she refuses or continues her campaign, then everyone sees her true nature. She becomes the petty, bitter wolf clinging to the past, while I remain the gracious Luna who tried. Either way, I win. Alpha Meredith laughed, a sound of genuine delight. Oh, I like her. She has claws hidden beneath that gentle exterior. What about the matter of an heir? Alpha Thaddeus of the Stormcrest Pack asked bluntly, his scarred face impassive. The pack needs certainty of succession. When will you and the Alpha King— That, Kael's voice cut through the room like a blade, is not the Council's concern. It is when pack stability depends on it, Thaddeus countered, unintimidated. We need to know— You need to know that my mate and I will make that decision in our own time, Kael said, his tone brooking no argument. The bond is barely 2 months old. Elara is still adjusting to her powers, her position, her role. We will not be rushed by political pressure. Elara felt warmth flood through the bond, his protectiveness, his respect for her autonomy. They talked about this in the quiet hours of the night, when the mate bond pulled them together and walls came down. Children would come, but not yet. Not until she was ready, until they were ready, until their relationship was built on more than just the goddess's decree. The Luna has proven herself today, Marcus spoke up from his position at Kael's right hand. She's shown wisdom, strategy, and strength. I move that we formally recognize her as Luna of the Northern Territories, with all rights and responsibilities that entails. Seconded, Alpha Garrett said immediately. One by one, the Alphas voiced their approval. Not all were enthusiastic. Alpha Thaddeus abstained and Alpha Cornelius of the Shadowfen Pack looked sour, but the majority carried. When Elder Moira stepped forward with the Luna's circlet, a delicate crown of silver and moonstone, Elara felt tears prick her eyes. Kael rose and took the circlet from Moira's hands. His silver eyes met Elara's golden ones, and the mate bond thrummed between them with an intensity that stole her breath. Elara Thorne, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You came into my life like a storm I never saw coming. You challenged everything I believed about power, about control, about what it means to be strong. He placed the circlet on her head with gentle hands. You are my mate, my equal, my Luna, and I am honored to stand beside you. The kiss he gave her was tender, reverent, so different from the claiming kiss at the gala. This was a promise, a partnership, a future being forged. The council erupted in howls of approval, the ancient tradition of welcoming a new Luna, but Elara barely heard them. All she felt was Kael, the bond between them settling into something deeper than desire, deeper than duty. Love, fragile and new, but growing stronger every day. Later, in the privacy of their shared chambers, Kael pulled her close, his face buried in her hair. I'm sorry, he whispered, for the weeks I avoided you, for the fear I let control me, for making you face the pack's judgment alone. You didn't make me face it alone, Elara corrected gently. You gave me the space to prove myself. That was a gift, Kael, even if it didn't feel like it. He pulled back to look at her, his expression raw. I was terrified. The bond, it made me feel things I'd spent years burying. Vulnerability, need, love. He cupped her face in his hands. I've been alone so long I forgot what it meant to let someone in. But you, Elara, you didn't just break down my walls. You made me want to tear them down myself. I'm scared too, she admitted. Every day I wake up wondering if I'm enough, if I can really do this, if the pack will ever truly accept me. They already do. You just proved that. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips, and even if they didn't, it wouldn't matter. You're mine, and I'm yours, and that's all that counts. A knock at the door interrupted them. Marcus entered, his expression grim. Alpha King, Lunar, we have a problem. Liana has just arrived at the pack house. She's requesting an audience. Elara and Kael exchanged glances. Through the bond, she felt his anger, his protective instinct, but she also felt his trust, his willingness to let her handle this her way. Show her to the receiving room, Elara said calmly, and have tea prepared. It's time Liana and I had a conversation. 20 minutes later, Elara sat across from the woman who'd tried to destroy her, a delicate tea service between them. Liana looked as beautiful as ever, but there were shadows under her eyes, a brittleness to her smile. You wanted to see me, Elara said pleasantly. I'm glad you came. Liana's laugh was bitter. Are you? I've done nothing but try to undermine you since the lunar gathering. I know. Elara poured tea with steady hands. But I also know why. You loved him, didn't you? Kael, you genuinely loved him, and he rejected you. That kind of pain makes people do desperate things. Something flickered in Liana's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. He never loved me. I don't think he's capable of love. He is, Elara said softly. He just needed the right person to show him how. She pushed a teacup across the table. Liana, I'm not your enemy. I didn't steal Kael from you. The goddess chose our bond long before either of us knew. You can hate me for that, or you can accept it and move forward. The choice is yours. Liana stared at the tea, her hands trembling. I don't know how to move forward. I've spent 2 years building my life around the idea of being his queen. Without that, who am I? Someone who gets to choose her own path, Elara replied. Someone who doesn't have to live in anyone's shadow. You're powerful, intelligent, beautiful. You could have any alpha you wanted, including Theron Nightshade, if the rumors are true. A ghost of a smile crossed Liana's face. Theron is different, kinder than I expected. Then maybe it's time to stop fighting for a future that was never meant to be and start building one that is. Liana was silent for a long moment. Then she picked up the teacup, took a sip, and met Elara's eyes. I can't promise we'll be friends. I'm not asking for friendship, just peace. Peace, Liana repeated, testing the word. I think I can manage that. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. And as Elara watched Liana leave, she felt Kael's pride and love wash over her through the bond, warm as sunlight. She was Lunar now, truly, completely, irrevocably, and she was exactly where she was meant to be. 6 months later, spring had transformed the Northern Territories into something magical. Wildflowers carpeted the forest floor in riots of color, and the rivers ran swift with snowmelt. The pack house itself seemed lighter, warmer, as if the building itself reflected the changes within. Elara stood on the balcony of the Lunar's office, a space that had been empty for decades, now filled with maps, books, and the constant flow of pack members seeking counsel. Below, she could see the training grounds where Sage drilled the younger warriors, the gardens where Elder Moira tended her herbs, the gates where Marcus coordinated border patrols. Her pack, her home, her purpose. Lunar Elara. A soft voice drew her attention. She turned to find Maya, a young Omega who'd recently joined the household staff, hovering nervously in the doorway. The delegation from the Shadow Pack has arrived. They're waiting in the Great Hall. Elara's heart quickened with anticipation. 3 months ago, she'd sent her proposal to the Shadow Pack, the offer of integration she'd outlined to the Council. It had been a gamble, one that many Alphas had opposed. But Kael had supported her, and together they'd crafted terms that balanced compassion with strength. Tell them I'll be there shortly, Elara said with a reassuring smile. And Maya, you don't have to call me Luna when we're alone. Elara is fine. Maya's eyes widened. But I'm someone who remembers what it's like to be underestimated because of rank, Elara said gently. You're more than your designation, Maya. Never forget that. The young Omega's smile was trembling, but genuine. As she left, Elara felt a familiar presence through the mate bond. Kael approaching with that predatory grace that still made her pulse race. He entered without knocking, as was his habit, and pulled her into his arms with the easy affection that had grown between them. Ready for this, he murmured against her hair. Nervous, she admitted. If this works, we could change everything, not just for our pack, but for how all packs treat outcasts and rogues. But if it fails, then we'll handle it together. He tilted her chin up, his silver eyes warm. You've already changed everything, Elara. The pack is stronger than it's been in years. Morale is high, the borders are secure, and even the most skeptical alphas respect you now. His smile turned wicked. Plus, you've made me insufferably happy, which I'm told is very disconcerting for everyone who knew me before. She laughed, the sound bright and free. Insufferable is right. You smiled at breakfast this morning. Marcus nearly dropped his coffee. I have reasons to smile now. He kissed her, slow and deep, and the mate bond sang between them. 6 months of learning each other, of building trust and partnership, of falling deeper in love with every passing day. It hadn't been easy. They'd fought, struggled, learned to balance 2 strong wills and the demands of leadership, but they'd done it together, and that made all the difference. Come on, Elara said, pulling back reluctantly. Let's go make history. The great hall was tense with anticipation. The council sat in their places, warriors lined the walls, and in the center stood 5 wolves from the shadow pack. They looked rough, scarred, wary, but their eyes held hope beneath the suspicion. Their leader, the scarred male who'd confronted Kael at the Lunar gathering, stepped forward. His name was Riker, and he'd proven to be surprisingly pragmatic in the negotiations. Alpha King Lunar, he bowed, the gesture still awkward but sincere. We've considered your offer. It's generous, more than we expected. It's fair, Elara corrected. You integrate into pack structure, follow our laws, contribute to our defense and prosperity. In return, you get territory, protection, and a place to belong. No wolf should have to live as an outcast if they're willing to be part of something greater. Some of our pack won't accept it, Riker admitted. They're too far gone, too bitter, but many will, families mostly. Wolves who were cast out for minor infractions, or who were born into the shadow pack and never knew another way. His eyes met hers, and she saw the weight of leadership in them, a burden she understood intimately. We accept your terms, Lunar, and we thank you for seeing us as more than just enemies. The hall erupted in mixed reactions, some cheering, others grumbling, but Kael stood, his presence commanding silence. Let it be known, he declared, his voice carrying across the space, that the shadow pack is no more. Those who accept our terms are now members of the Northern Territories, with all rights and responsibilities that entails. Those who refuse, his eyes hardened, will be treated as the rogues they choose to be. Elder Moira stepped forward, her ancient eyes gleaming with approval. The moon goddess smiles on this day. Lunar Elara has brought mercy and wisdom to our pack, and we are stronger for it. Let the integration begin. The ceremony that followed was simple but profound. Each shadow pack wolf who chose integration knelt before Kael and Elara, swearing loyalty to the Northern Territories. Elara felt each oath through her lunar bond, the mystical connection that tied her to every pack member. It was overwhelming and beautiful, this web of loyalty and belonging that she was now part of. When it was done, when the last oath was sworn and the hall began to empty, Marcus approached with a rare smile. Your father would be so proud, he said quietly. You've done what no Lunar has done in generations, expanded the pack through compassion rather than conquest. I had good teachers, Elara replied, squeezing his hand, and a good example to follow. My father saved lives through sacrifice. I'm just trying to save them through understanding. Later that evening, Elara found herself in the gardens, seeking a moment of peace. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and the air smelled of roses and pine. There you are. Sage appeared beside her, looking uncharacteristically serious. I have news. Liana Silvercrest and Alpha Theron Nightshade announced their mating bond today. It's official. Elara felt a pang of something, not jealousy, but a bittersweet recognition of how much had changed. I'm glad, she said, and meant it. She deserves happiness. She sent you a message. Sage handed over a sealed letter. Said to tell you. Thank you. Elara opened the letter with trembling hands. The message was brief. You were right. I was fighting for a future that was never mine. Theron sees me, truly sees me, in a way Kael never did. I'm sorry for the pain I caused. May the goddess bless your union. L. She's letting go, Elara whispered. Finally. We all are, Sage said softly. Letting go of the old ways, the old prejudices, the old fears. You've shown us a better path, Elara. Not just as Lunar, but as a person who refuses to let rank or history define worth. Movement in the garden entrance caught Elara's attention. Kael stood there watching her with an expression that made her heart skip. Even after 6 months, he could still take her breath away. "I'll leave you two alone," Sage said with a knowing grin, slipping away into the twilight. Kael crossed to Elara in long strides, pulling her into his arms. "I've been thinking," he murmured against her hair. "Dangerous habit," she teased. "About the future. About us." He pulled back to look at her, his silver eyes intense. "About children." Elara's breath caught. They'd discussed it in abstract terms, but this felt different, more immediate. "And I think I'm ready, if you are." His hand moved to rest on her stomach, gentle and reverent. "I want to see you round with our child. Want to watch you teach them everything you've taught this pack. Compassion, strength, wisdom. Want to build a family with you, Elara. A real family, not just a political alliance." Tears pricked her eyes. "I'm ready too," she whispered. "I'm ready for all of it, the challenges, the joy, the chaos, as long as it's with you." The kiss they shared was promise and passion, future and forever. And as the moon rose full and bright above them, Elara felt the goddess's blessing wash over her like warm light. She'd come so far from the forgotten Omega in the packhouse kitchens. She'd been humiliated, tested, challenged at every turn. But she'd risen above it all, not by becoming someone else, but by embracing who she truly was. A Lunar Omega, a Lunar, a mate, a leader, and most importantly, herself. 1 year later, the nursery was filled with soft morning light and the gentle sounds of a baby's coos. Elara sat in the rocking chair, cradling her daughter, Aria, named for the song the wind sang through the pines. She had Kael's dark hair and Elara's golden eyes, and she was perfect. Kael stood at the window, watching the pack gather below for the spring festival. Under Elara's guidance, it had become a celebration of unity, former Shadow Pack members mingling freely with those born to the Northern Territories, ranks mattering less than contribution and character. "She's going to change the world," Kael said softly, turning to look at his mate and daughter. "Just like her mother did." "She's going to have a choice," Elara corrected gently. "That's all I want for her, the freedom to choose her own path, whatever that may be." Marcus appeared in the doorway, his eyes soft as he gazed at his goddaughter. "The pack is asking for you both. They want to see the heir." Elara rose, settling Aria in her arms. Together, she and Kael descended to the great hall, where hundreds of wolves waited. The cheers that erupted when they appeared were deafening, genuine, full of love and loyalty. This was her pack, her family, her home. And as Elara looked out at the sea of faces, Omega and Alpha, warrior and healer, born pack member and integrated outcast, she knew that the goddess's plan had been perfect all along. She'd been planted in the hardest soil, in the darkest place, and she had flourished beyond anyone's wildest dreams. Thank you for joining Elara and Kael's journey. If you enjoyed this story of transformation, love, and finding strength in unexpected places, please subscribe for more tales of wolves, magic, and destiny. Leave a comment telling us where you're listening from. We love hearing from our pack around the world. Until the next full moon, may you flourish wherever you're planted.